Finally, the video you've all been waiting for. We're going to get up close and personal with these Chinesey eBay spec coilovers and find out just how bad they really are. Or how good. If they're good, I'd be surprised. Anyway. I don't know about you, but when I think cheap coilovers, I think BCBRs, which are around $1,300, maybe some MCA blues or even the purples, which are mid $1,500 to sort of $1,800 odd dollars. I don't think $400 coilovers, and so that's what I've got with me here. A set of adjustable, to a degree, coilovers for the NA NB MX5, and so these are going to be interesting. First off, let's get them unpacked and have a bit of a detailed look on what they come with, what's inside of them and what makes them up, and then we can go ahead and stick them on the car and see how the thing handles. So please don't consider this an unboxing video, but I did want to show you the, I guess you'd say, quality of packaging that comes with an eBay set of coilovers. In this case, the thing's actually wrapped in plastic, which I find surprising, and then of course the cardboard box. So let's get into it and see what's inside. So I think you'll agree this is pretty funny. Probably the funniest thing I've seen, although quite impressive still, is the level of unusual choice of packaging. They look well packaged, although pretty rough. It's like just random scraps. I'm presuming that's their packaging parts bin, and they just chuck it all in there and pray for the best. But there's so much of it that these things are probably actually well packaged. Let's see what's inside. So in terms of what comes in the kit, obviously you get your 4 coilovers, that's a given, and they were amusingly packaged, as you saw, with like strips of foam padding rather than any sort of nice sort of cut or designed packaging. It was kind of just crap just piled in there around these things to keep them secure. Although that said, it was well packaged and they weren't going to really hit each other or hit something else, and I'd certainly be surprised if they were to end up damaged in packaging or in shipping. We also got some interesting paperwork with the kit. First off, we've got what looks like a customer service card, they're calling it, from our friends at Max Speeding Rods. Is there an S missing, or is that Max Speeding? Max Speeding? Is that supposed? Here's the thing, all right. Even the website, Max Speeding Rods. Was it intentional? Did they purposefully leave the thing out? But then you look here, Max Speeding Rods. Max Speeding Rods. But I'm confused. Is it peeding or speeding? Is it Chinesey? Is it just Chinglish? The website is Max Speeding Rods. Their Facebook page has an S. Their Twitter page has an S. Actually, this is, to be honest, this is some of the best packaging, or should I say paperwork, that's come with any Chinese spec stuff I've ever seen before. And I guess their name comes from Conrods by the look of it, and that's where they got the rods part, and now they've sort of branched out into other stuff, even turbos. Interesting. So let's get that out of the way. The other stuff we got here was some detail on adjustable dampening. By adjusting the C, drivers can enjoy a comfortable experience of forged aluminium camber plate, pillow ball upper mount, high tensile spring, a dust boot, forged aluminium locks, and fully adjustable full length steel shaft or aluminium. Yeah, definitely from China. Again, maxspeedingrods.com, not speeding. Introduction to your Max Speeding Rods. So I guess, is the weird name and the funny Chinglish an indication of the quality of the coilover itself? Well, we'll find out. Anyway, and then also we got some Max Speeding Rods branded spanners Although I had a set of MCA ones sitting here and these fit as well, so usual business. Alright, let's get on to the coilover itself. So on first inspection, it actually looks really quite nice. The aluminium collars seem quite handy. The spring seems reasonable. The threads on the shock body are quite nice. This lower section's kind of a bit it's obviously just powder coated or painted steel. The join here from the lower bolt mount is kind of dodgy weld. It's kind of a dodgy looking weld, and the rubber bushing here seems reasonable. There's even a little drain hole, which is interesting. Up top, things seem quite good for the money. I do notice a pillow ball mount in here, which on an MX-5 isn't really that necessary. We don't have a lot of, I guess we'd call like axial load, so the shock is pushing up and down, but it's not really rotating in any way, like it would have in some other cars, being in a double A-arm car. Yeah, so let's get this on the ground and we'll pull it apart and just see what sort of bits and pieces are inside it. I'm surprised to find no corrosion inside here, and there's even a drain hole, which is surprising. The damper itself, look, it doesn't look that bad actually, to be honest. As I mentioned earlier, the threads feel quite nice. Let's see how pushing on this, yeah, I don't know. It compresses and it springs back. What does that mean? I really don't know. The spring perch and locking collars look quite reasonable, and there's these washers for the spring perches, which is surprising. I would have thought that they could have cheaped out on that, being Chinese stuff. It comes with a fairly small bump stop, but nonetheless, at least it comes with a bump stop and the rubber boot, which is good to see because, you know, keeps a bit of dust out of the seals and things. A couple of washers and spacers and things that all look par for the course. I couldn't comment on their quality, but look, they're not rusted to the crap, so I guess that's a good good start. The spring is reasonable. And to be honest, this top perch is better than I expected, and yeah, look, the pillow ball, as I mentioned earlier, probably not that necessary. All in all, look, I guess the components are actually on their own quite okay. They seem to be suitable for the purpose, although I am a bit suspect on the quality of the damper, and that's probably going to be the thing that lets us down here. Now, so far, I've been actually quite surprised with how impressive these actually look, given the price and where they've come from, and even the funny brand name. So the plan is to install the coilovers in this red NA I've got behind me. I've been driving around in this thing on and off for the last few weeks, and it's actually not that bad. It's got the stock shocks in it at the moment, and everything else is pretty much factory. The stock shocks aren't that bad. It's not too boaty, it's actually not too high, so I think they're OEM springs. They do feel reasonably firm, but they're quite compliant. And it's not uncomfortable to drive, and it still handles reasonably well. So I guess you could say these coilovers have got quite a bit to go up against, and so they're going to have to be quite good to be able to compete with the OEM stuff in terms of comfort and ride quality, and still, you know, handling and whatnot. So I'm not going to bore you with sort of the detail on how to install coilovers. There's plenty of videos out there on how to do that, but I will show you anything unusual with these particular coilovers and anything that goes wrong, of course. So anyway, let's get to work on putting these things together. Stocky 1.6. Now the rear's fairly easy to remove. I've already undone the top two upper mounting bolts inside the boot, so we just need to undo this 17mm here. And that's it, the shock is actually free, although we'll need to probably undo the sway bar to get enough push down on the suspension to get the shock out. What we might need to do is undo this bolt here. Now, it falls right out. Now, I've thrown the shock in and you might be thinking, hang on, there's something that doesn't look right. And yes, that's because there's no spring. And the reason for that is we're going to set the base height without the spring. And that is the amount of suspension travel we have, or the amount of suspension travel the shock will have before it bottoms out on the bump stop. Now to do that, we're going to put the wheel on with no spring, jack the suspension up, and we need to make sure that the bump stop engages before the wheel starts to rub on any of the body under here, or even its edge here. Hopefully it isn't that big of a wheel, it shouldn't hit there, it'll probably hit the tub first. And so we do that so that we've got as much suspension travel as possible. Once we've done that, we can then adjust the spring perch to get our height just right, and we should have probably just a little bit of preload in that spring. We'll see how that goes. I've now got the jack under the wheel. I've put the wheel back on the hub, and we've got the coilover in with no spring. And what we can do, we can jack the wheel up, and we'll see how much bump travel we've actually got. Alright, I can feel now the coilovers bottoming out on the bump stop, and that means this is how much suspension travel we've got. It also means that we're not going to bottom out the tyre in the wheel arch or anything weird like that, which could happen if you were to dump your coilovers too low, wind the base into the coil too much. We've got enough travel here, which is a good thing. So what we could do, we could lower the car some more because there's enough room. I can actually get my hand up here. We could lower the car more by winding that coilover into the base height of the bottom mount of the damper, or we can also adjust the spring preload. Okay, I wanted to see what sort of weight we're looking at here and compare it to the OEM coilover. So scale is zeroed. 4.3 kilograms for the rear shock from Max Peeding rods. Let's compare that to the OEM coilover. Well, 4.3 kilo. Interesting. Anyway, continue on. It's time to focus on the front now, and much the same as the rear, really. It's a little bit trickier on the front than MX-5, a little bit more work with the suspension to try and loosen things up to get the coilover out, but we'll get it done. It's a bit gross. Look at the boots all dodgy. Let's get the new ones in. Alright, we've got this side in and buttoned up. And we've just got to do up the sway bar end link. But we've set our spring height, our spring perch height that is, our base adjustment height here. It's also been set, and there's only a small gap here, which means if you wanted the car to go lower, you wouldn't have a lot of room. Although I'm not expecting this to be too low once we're done. We should have a nice level ride height. So the car is now all buttoned up, and it's time to drop it off the stands and see just what we've got. Well, it's way too low at the front. We've obviously got our numbers wrong there, so we'll wind up the spring a little bit. But at the rear, a little bit high maybe. But I think, as I said, it's already at its lowest adjustment possible anyway. So we'll leave the rear as it is, we'll just wind the front up a little. Okay, so it took a few goes with the jack going up and down, the wheels coming on and off to get the heights just right, and everything where it should be. There's a bug. But it's all done. So it actually looks pretty good. The interesting thing, so the rear, you can only get so low, and in fact this is pretty much as low as you can get it. This is certainly not stance looking, it actually looks quite reasonable, whereas the front you can go much lower than this if you wanted to, and it's probably, I guess what you'd call a square stance. If I move back, the front and rear sort of sill to center points is about equal. It's probably a little bit lower at the front, a little bit of rake, which is a good thing for one of these cars. Of course, the next thing to do now is let's take it for a spin and see how it goes. So we've got the coilovers in. I've tightened up all the wheel nuts and it's time to take it for its first proper drive. Let's see how this goes. Nothing particularly feels unusual pulling out of the driveway there. I've got a few speed bumps, sleeping policemen around my area, so water drops. A few sleeping policemen around here, so let's see how this thing handles the suburban streets. Everyday driving. Right off the bat, I don't know if you can hear those noises, but it sort of sounds pretty crashy. Alright, so first speed bump coming up. The ride feels really unusually stiff for such soft springs. Only 7 kilogram front and I think, was it 5 in the rear? 4 in the rear? I can't quite remember. But I guess indicative of Chinese eBay quality is a crashy ride, right? And so these do kind of feel quite crashy, even just a few minutes into driving. Well, let's slow to say 20 kilometers an hour for this speed bump, which is pretty slow, and even at that slow speed, there's a real sort of clunky feeling, clunky noise to the coilovers. And they don't give a lot of, they don't give a quality feeling to the ride, which, yeah, again, for something that's got such soft springs, it doesn't feel soft. It doesn't sound soft. Smooth roads, they seem to feel reasonable. Slow undulations, they actually don't feel too bad. I think it's the really sudden bumps, sharp edges, potholes and things that they really don't feel nice on. But smoother, faster speed roads like this, they actually don't feel too bad. What we might do, let's see sort of how they feel on a launch. This is, pretty basic 1.6 this car with bugger all power, so it's not like it's going to be fast, and it's not going to have a lot of power to put down, but nonetheless, we're doing this for science, right? The worst part about these coilovers is that constant clunky thud that they make with sort of short bumps. The longer undulations, it's okay. They seem to smooth it out reasonably, but it's the clunk, clunk, clunk that you feel that a proper coilover doesn't do. A proper, reasonable quality, even the BCs, I don't remember them doing it. It really is a pretty crashy ride. On the street, I'm not so sure these things, you'd probably get sick of them pretty quickly. I wouldn't say they're unbearable. Maybe if you turn the radio up and you're just cruising in low speed everyday peak hour traffic, you probably wouldn't notice it. But these sort of more open roads where I'm doing 70, 80 kilometers an hour, you know, you hit a bump and there's this clunk. We've got roundabout coming up. Let's see how the car handles a roundabout. And I guess in summary, you know, if you're on a ultra tight budget and you're looking for something to really sort of just stance your car, it's not going to give you a lot of performance benefit, these coilovers, but they'll get you into the market, I guess. If you're looking for something to start out in, then I guess they might work. Would I use them? No, probably not. But they were a worthy experiment. They gave me something to do. They gave you a bit of an insight into just how good or bad these things could be. Anyway, folks, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe so you can see more of this awesome, stupid stuff that I do. Make sure you hit the like buttons because that actually supports me in doing some things like this and spending $400 on coilovers I didn't actually need. But we get to find out just how awesome these max speeding rods really are, and yeah, they're okay. They're not as bad as I thought, let's be honest. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time.